The corpses that wouldn't stay buried. 18th century Europe. Night fell early in the villages of 18th century Europe, not because the sun moved faster, but because fear closed the doors before dusk. Candles were extinguished, windows were barred, children were pulled from the streets by trembling hands. Somewhere beyond the last fence, beneath the frozen soil, something was wrong. The dead were not staying dead. It began quietly. A cow found drained of blood. A child waking with bruises shaped like fingers around the throat. A man wasting away, pale and hollow-eyed, swearing that his dead brother stood at the foot of his bed each night, breathing. No one laughed, because graves were being found disturbed, the first signs. In villages across Serbia, Hungary, Transylvania, and the Habsburg frontier, the same reports appeared again and again. Fresh graves collapsed inward, as if something had pushed up from below. Coffins cracked, earth displaced. And when the bodies were exhumed, often weeks after burial, what they found was worse than nightmares. The corpses were not rotting. Their skin was dark, stretched tight and swollen. Their stomachs bulged grotesquely. Blood, thick, black, and foul, leaked from their mouths and noses. Some had open eyes. Others had expressions twisted in agony. Villagers screamed that they had been feeding. Worse still, when wooden stakes were driven into their chests, the bodies bled. Some emitted groans as trapped gases escaped. To terrified witnesses, it sounded like the dead screaming. And then came the detail that broke reason completely. Hair and nails appeared longer than when the body was buried. To the living, there was only one explanation. The corpse was growing. The returning dead. They called them by many names. Revenants, Upers, Vrykalakas, Nosferatu. But the meaning was the same. The dead had returned to claim the living. Eyewitness accounts described figures standing outside windows at night, pale shapes moving between houses, shadows watching from the tree line. Those who reported visitations often died soon after, weak, coughing blood, skin turning gray before the final breath. Entire families were wiped out. Villagers swore the dead called their names in familiar voices. Husbands heard wives, children heard parents. Anyone who answered was marked. Church bells rang constantly. Priests sprinkled holy water until their hands shook. But prayers did not stop the deaths. So the villages did what they believed was the only option left. They dug up the dead, official horror. This was not hysteria ignored by authority. The panic grew so severe that Austrian military officials were ordered to investigate. Doctors, surgeons, officers trained in reason. They arrived expecting superstition. They left writing reports that still exist today. In 1725, officials documented the case of Petar Blagojevich, a man dead for 10 weeks, yet blamed for 9 deaths. When his grave was opened, witnesses described no decomposition, fresh blood in the mouth, skin intact, new hair growth. A stake was driven through his heart. Blood poured out. The witnesses screamed. His head was severed, and the body burned. The deaths stopped. Similar reports followed, signed, dated, and archived. These were not peasant rumors. These were military documents. And they all described the same impossible thing. The corpses looked alive. The ritual of destruction. By the mid-1700s, a grim protocol emerged. If a village suspected a revenant, the grave was opened at dawn, witnesses were present. A priest recited last rites. The executioner acted quickly. The stake was driven first, usually hawthorn or ash. If blood flowed, it confirmed guilt. Next came decapitation. Sometimes the head was placed between the legs, sometimes it was buried face down. Mouths were stuffed with bricks, stones, or garlic to prevent feeding. Finally, the body was burned. The smell of human fat and charred flesh filled the air. Ashes were scattered or sealed away. Villagers watched in silence, because they knew one truth. If they were wrong, they had murdered a corpse. If they were right, they had saved themselves. Why the dead looked alive. Modern science explains what terror could not. Decomposition gases bloated bodies, forcing blood from the mouth. Skin shrank, making hair and nails appear longer. Internal pressure caused groans when punctured. Cold climate slowed decay. But in the 1700s, none of this was known. What they saw was undeniable. A body that bled, a corpse that moved, a face that changed. And when villages performed the rituals, the deaths stopped. To them, cause and effect were proven. The true horror. The horror was not that vampires existed. The horror was that perfectly natural corpses looked so wrong that entire civilizations believed the dead were hunting the living. The horror was that reason had no voice in the face of fear. And the most unsettling truth of all, if you stood in those villages, if you opened those graves, if you saw those bodies, you would have believed too. Because some corpses don't rot quietly, some swell, some bleed, some stare back, and in the flickering candlelight of 18th century Europe, with death stalking every household, the dead didn't need to rise, they only needed to look alive. Most people don't know this history exists. If you want more stories that sound impossible but aren't, subscribe now, and like the video so this story doesn't stay buried.